In the late summer of 480 BC, a narrow strip of land between the mountains and the sea became the most famous battlefield in human history. On one side, the largest army the ancient world had ever seen. Hundreds of thousands of men, drawn from every corner of an empire that stretched from the Aegean to the borders of India. On the other side, a few thousand Greeks. And at their heart, 300 Spartans who had already been told they were going to die. This is the story of the Battle of Thermopylae, the stand that should have been a footnote, and instead became a legend that has echoed for 2,500 years. To understand Thermopylae, you have to understand the man who marched on Greece. His name was Xerxes, king of kings, ruler of the Persian Empire, the most powerful state on earth. A decade earlier, his father Darius had tried to punish the Greek city-states for supporting a rebellion against Persian rule. That first invasion ended in humiliation, on a field called Marathon, where the Athenians sent the Persians fleeing back to their ships. Xerxes did not intend to repeat his father's mistake. For years, he gathered his forces. Ancient writers, chief among them the historian Herodotus, claimed his army numbered in the millions. Modern historians are more cautious, estimating somewhere between 100 and 300,000 fighting men. Either way, it was a force of staggering scale. He bridged the Hellespont, the strait separating Asia from Europe, by lashing hundreds of ships together to form a floating road. When a storm destroyed the first bridge, legend says Xerxes ordered the sea itself to be whipped as punishment. This was a king who believed nothing could stand in his way. And as his vast column poured into northern Greece, swallowing cities whole, it seemed he was right. The Greeks were divided. Dozens of fiercely independent city-states, often at war with one another, now faced a single, terrifying question: submit or resist. Many submitted. But a coalition of the defiant, led by Athens and Sparta, chose to fight. Their problem was the math. They could not hope to match Persia in open battle. So they looked instead for terrain that would erase Xerxes' greatest advantage, his numbers. They found it at a place called Thermopylae. The name means, the hot gates, for the sulfur springs that bubbled there. It was a coastal pass where the mountains crowded so close to the sea that, in places, the road narrowed to just a few meters wide. Here, a wall of men could hold. Here, an army of millions could only attack a few hundred at a time. To hold the pass, the Spartans sent their king, Leonidas, along with his personal guard of 300 elite warriors. Around them gathered other Greeks, Thespians, Thebans, Arcadians, and more. In total, perhaps 7,000 men. But why only 300 Spartans, when Sparta could field far more? The answer is part religion, part calculation. A sacred festival forbade the Spartans from marching to war in full strength. So Leonidas took only 300, and, the sources tell us, he chose only men who already had living sons. Men whose family lines would survive their deaths. He was not leading them to a battle. He was leading them to a sacrifice. When Xerxes' army arrived and saw how few defenders stood before them, the king was reportedly baffled. He waited 4 days, certain the Greeks would lose their nerve and flee. They did not. A scout sent to observe the Spartans returned with a strange report: the warriors were calmly exercising and combing their long hair. Xerxes asked a Greek exile in his court what this meant. The man replied that the Spartans groom their hair when they are preparing to die. On the 5th day, Xerxes attacked. He sent in his first waves expecting to sweep the Greeks aside. Instead, the narrow pass became a killing ground. The Spartans and their allies fought as a wall of bronze, overlapping shields, long spears, fighting shoulder to shoulder in the tight phalanx formation they had trained for since childhood. Wave after wave broke against them. The Persians, packed into the bottleneck, could not bring their numbers to bear. Their lighter armor and shorter weapons were no match for the Greek line. In desperation, Xerxes unleashed his finest troops, the legendary immortals, the 10,000 elite soldiers of the empire, so named because every fallen man was instantly replaced. Even they could not break through. For 2 days, the Greeks held. 2 days against the might of an empire. And with every failed assault, the impossible began to feel almost possible. But the hot gates had a secret. A mountain path wound through the hills, around and behind the Greek position. And a local man, his name was Ephialtes, came to Xerxes with an offer. For a reward, he would show the Persians the way. That night, the immortals slipped along the hidden trail, brushing aside the small force of Greeks guarding it. By dawn, they would emerge behind Leonidas, and the trap that had held the Persians would close on the Greeks instead. When word reached Leonidas that he had been outflanked, he understood at once that the battle was lost. So he made a choice. He dismissed the bulk of the allied army, sending thousands of men home to fight another day. But he himself would stay. With his 300 Spartans. And with them remained the Thespians, who refused to abandon the line, and the Thebans. They would buy time with their lives. On the final morning, Leonidas led his men out from the narrow wall, out into the wider ground, to take as many of the enemy with them as they could. The fighting was savage. The Greeks fought with spears until the spears shattered, then with swords, and when the swords broke, the sources say, they fought with their hands and their teeth. Leonidas fell. And around his body, a desperate, brutal struggle erupted as his men fought to recover their fallen king, driving the Persians back again and again. At last, the survivors withdrew to a small hill to make their final stand. Surrounded on every side, they were buried beneath a storm of Persian arrows. When it was over, every last defender lay dead. Thermopylae was, in the cold language of strategy, a defeat. The pass fell. Xerxes marched on. Athens itself was captured and burned. And yet, the stand at the hot gates had done something no map could measure. It had bought the Greeks precious time. It had proven that the Persian war machine could bleed. And it had given a divided people something to rally around, a story of courage so pure it turned defeat into defiance. Weeks later, the Greek navy crushed the Persian fleet at Salamis. The following year, the Greek army destroyed Xerxes' forces at Plataea. The invasion was over. Greece was free. And on the hill where the last men died, the Greeks raised a simple stone with an epitaph that has never been forgotten. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. 300 Spartans. 7,000 Greeks. One narrow pass. They could not win. They knew it. And they stood anyway. That is why, 25 centuries later, we still speak their names.